So every once in a while, you'll see a draft class at a particular position come along, and it becomes the standard bearer. It becomes the draft class that all other future classes, either in terms of the draft as an entirety or at a specific position, are measured against. When you look at the quarterback position, everything will always be measured against the 1983 draft. They had 6 quarterbacks going round 1, and 3 of them ended up finding their way into Canton, in John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino. Although the 2004 draft had 4 quarterbacks taken, and 3 of those include Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger, hasn't exactly done a terrible job of living up to that one. But that's what all quarterback classes 30 plus years later are still measured against in terms of their depth, their talent, their star power, impact. It's that 83 draft class. Well, I think when it comes to the wide receiver position, for years, if not generations, everything's going to be measured potentially against that 2014 draft class. Just loaded with talent all throughout the draft, at the top, in the middle, at the back end, you name it. There was talent everywhere. And I think what can happen, especially when you're so nearly removed from that particular draft class, that particular draft cycle or year, is it can cloud the way you view the classes at that position for the next few years. Like, for example, last year, a wide receiver class I still thought was pretty good, and I still think was pretty good, but maybe I thought it was a little bit better than what it actually was, in part because of just how great that 2014 class was. I was trying to compare 2015 to 2014 and trying to justify it. Just not a fair comparison. Whereas this year, in 2016, with the lack of a clear-cut top 10 or even potentially top 20 wide receiver in many people's eyes, this wide receiver class seems to be inferior. This wide receiver class isn't nearly as good. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. It might not be as good as the previous 2 years. It probably isn't as good as 2015. It most certainly isn't as good as 2014. Fact of the matter is, this is still a solid wide receiver class where you can find some productive players throughout, and you could potentially find a couple of guys that may go on to have a Pro Bowl year or two in the course of their career. There's talent in this wide receiver class. Like I said, it's not as deep and not quite as quality as previous years, but I still think it's a good class. When I look at this class, though, we start at the top. My number 1 guy is Corey Coleman. I think he's a top 15 talent in this draft. And to me, it's interesting when we talk about Corey Coleman, you have those that really love him. They love his speed. They love his elusiveness in the open field. They love his catch radius, his explosiveness, his vertical ability, so on and so forth. But then you'll have those people that do not like him all that much and maybe wouldn't even touch him with the top 15 pick in the 2nd round because they question the system that he came from. They question his size. They question his pure deep speed. Lots of questions there. Some will question his hand. I look at Corey Coleman and I say this, yeah, sure, he played in a track meet conference like the Big 12, and maybe he didn't face the best corners, the best overall defensive talent he could have on a week-in, week-out basis. But this guy is a playmaker. Get the ball in his hands and watch big things happen. And when I'm looking for impact players at the wide receiver position in this draft, the guy to me that I feel is the most properly equipped or well-suited to do that is Corey Coleman. System things at this time be damned. Now, if Corey Coleman ends up busting out, then yes, in the future, I'm going to start looking at Baylor wide receivers in an entirely different light. But even in that case, Josh Gordon, when he puts down the pipe, is a really damn good NFL wide receiver. Kendall Wright hasn't been great, but he's been solid. So it's not like Baylor's produced a bunch of bust wide receivers like Florida Gators did under the fun and gun offense of Steve Spurrier for years back in the 90s and early 2000s at Florida. It's an entirely different situation here, in my opinion. It's most certainly not what USC has done in terms of the wide receivers they've cranked out over the years. A lot of disappointments, a lot of busts, and a lot of underproducers based off of where they were drafted and based off the hype they got out of college. I don't think Baylor's wide receiver position is anywhere near that category. To me, Corey Coleman's the number 1 guy. There's one other wide receiver that I view as a first-round talent in this draft, and I had initially kind of waffled back and forth on whether or not I thought it was a first-round talent or maybe a very high second-round talent. But at the end of the day, every time I would go back and watch Josh Doctson, I would see something new. Every time I'd go back and watch Josh Doctson, I was impressed with something. Easy for me to say his name, apparently. I'm so excited about him. But I absolutely love this kid. No, he's not a burner, but he's a quality route runner, very good size, quality hands, seem to have a nose for getting open, seem to have a nose for making the big spectacular type of play. To me, he does profile as a potential number 1 wide receiver at the NFL level, even more than the Laquon Treadwell, and that's why I give him the edge. And when I look at him, I feel like he is a first-round talent in this draft. In a class that with 31 picks in round number 1, there are not anywhere near 31 actual first-round talents. I do think Josh Doctson is one of those guys to me that actually bothers to carry a first-round grade. A low first-round grade, number 2 wide receiver in this class, but I do think he is worth a first-round pick. And at the end of the day, if front offices and GMs and scouts are good at their job, even if it's in the mid to late 20s, Josh Doctson will be a first-round pick in this draft, period. It's not always just about speed at the position, which is what a lot of people are going to say about a Laquon Treadwell and try to still talk about him being the number 1 wide receiver in this class. You know, I look at Treadwell, and I have more concerns about his ability to separate at the NFL level from quick and fast corners than I do Josh Doctson. I think he's a good physical presence on the outside, quality hands, can go make the jump ball, big catch radius. I think Laquon Treadwell is a starter at the NFL level. I'm just not sure if he's a star at the NFL level. But again, if you're picking late first round, early second round, you probably love to have the guy. Because either if you're picking late first round, he could be an impact player for you by helping round out your receiving core. Or if you're picking early in round 2, you feel like you're arguably getting a first round talent at that position and a guy that can come in and contribute right away, which he probably will. In terms of other names in this class, you know, Tyler Boyd, I think, has the DUI question, yes, and some teams are concerned about the lack of muscle on his frame or the lack of pure speed and his ability to separate. But to me, he's perhaps the most refined route runner in this entire draft class, really quality hands, just a really good, solid football player, and I'm still sticking with him as my number 4 wide receiver in this class. Will Fuller, I kind of hesitate on a little bit because I see the speed and I see the potential of what he can do at Notre Dame, but I also know that he drops a lot of footballs. And I always have a pause for concern when guys with great speed can't catch the football because it doesn't matter how open you get. It doesn't matter how consistently you could stretch the top of the defense. If you can't haul the ball in, if you can't catch the ball, does it freaking matter? And that's a serious question I have about Will Fuller going along with this really lean frame. Can he hold up on the outside? Is he best suited to play in the slot? Can he catch the football? And I don't know if he can consistently at the NFL level. If he works on his hands, you know, he could be a very, very nice player. He's not going to be like Odell Beckham Jr. special or anything like that, but he could be a very, very nice player. I'm going to stand by my man, Hollywood Rashad Higgins. I know that, you know, heading into the 2015 college football season, I was very high on him, thought he could potentially be a first-round pick. I don't know if it's quite worked out that way. I have some concerns about him in terms of his ability to separate because I'm not sure that he's particularly quick or especially fast. But again, a pretty good route runner, really good hands. I love the anger with which he plays at once he catches the football. A guy that's not afraid to get physical, not afraid to lower his shoulder. I really, really like Rashad Higgins, and I think he's a solid football player. And I think he's a second-round talent. I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't drafted until round 4 or even 5. That's just the way it goes. If there's one wide receiver in this draft that I think I could be right on in terms of being higher on him than others are, it's Jordan Payton from UCLA. I really like this kid. And I just can't understand why more people don't get behind him. Maybe they think that he's a guy that does a lot of different things okay, but he's nothing special or great in any one area, lacks speed and quickness. I don't know. I think he's quick enough. I think he's fast enough. He's got good size, quality hands, has a knack for getting open. I really, really like this guy. And if I'm looking for a potential at least number 2 starter as a third-round pick, I'm looking at Jordan Payton. I think he's a pretty good option. You know, if there's one wide receiver, though, in this draft that I think that I'll be wrong on because either A, I have him graded too low, or B, I'm just wrong about him, I think it could be Michael Thomas from Ohio State. I've never been very, very high on him throughout the entirety of the draft process. But there's a part of me that wonders if he is going to be an NFL wide receiver at a higher level than he was at the college level. Because part of it was the system that he played in at Ohio State under Urban Meyer. The quarterback problems with Cardale Jones, JT Barrett, it didn't matter. You know, he had flashes where he showed some really good route running. This is a guy that plays quicker and faster than he times in the 40 at the combine. You know, I look at him and I say, you know, in 2 or 3 years, people could be coming back to this video and saying, you were wrong about Michael Thomas. And you know what? I could even foresee potentially where I'm wrong about him. But I also have concerns about a guy that never really truly dominated, coming from a system under Urban Meyer that has never really produced quality in terms of NFL wide receivers. And a guy that struggled at one point in time to pick up a college playbook, how's he going to adjust to the NFL speed, the NFL level, and an NFL playbook? And how quickly is he going to be able to pick up said NFL playbook? I don't know. In terms of other players in this draft, for those of you that have been fucking asking me forever about Moritz Boehringer, the time has come. I'm going to talk about him for 30 seconds to a minute, swear to God. I know a lot of you, especially if you're in Germany, you're like, oh, sprechen Sie dick? Outstanding! Da! Ja, whatever fuck. 6'4", 227-pound white boy that can fly. Who doesn't like that? Those dudes don't grow on trees. And you know, as somebody of German descendancy like myself, I can't lie. I'm kind of rooting for Boehringer. I really, really am. But when you look at it, and you're talking about on day 3 of the draft, you're looking for talent. You're looking for upside. You're looking to gamble with those picks on guys that either can play a role on special teams, or they can give you some depth, or they can be guys that can potentially develop into something so much more. And with Boehringer, you've got an option here, as much as with any wide receiver that you would take in all of day number 3, a guy that can be so much more. Sure, he's going to be incredibly raw in terms of the actual game of football. He's not somebody I would expect to come in and contribute immediately. But dudes of that size with that speed and quickness and that overall explosiveness and athleticism do not grow on trees. And if you could teach him at all how to be an NFL wide receiver, if you could teach him at all how to catch the football, this dude could end up being a starter at the NFL level. He really, truly could. His athletic upside is that high. It really is. We'll see what ends up happening. To me, in terms of his draft range, I got him as a 4th to 5th round talent. I wouldn't be surprised if a team got frisky and wanted to gamble on him late in round number 3. Because again, that athletic talent and upside is incredible. And he's worth it, that gamble, at that point in time. Especially once you get into round 4 or 5. Any team, I don't give a damn who you are. Rounds 4 or 5, take a gamble on him. Because if it rolls craps, so what? If it comes up something good, man, you look like geniuses. Other players that I really like in this draft class, I'd like Leonte Carroo from Rutgers more if he behaved a little better off the field and he stayed healthier. Because, man, there were times that when he was on the football field, he was as dominated as any wide receiver in college football in 2015. Coleman, Doctson, Laquon, Treadwell, all be damned. Carroo, flash moments where he could be that dude. However, you got the off-the-field and durability concerns. I have questions about just how explosive of a player he is. But again, late day 2, early day 3, man, he could really help somebody. As could Jakeem Grant from Texas Tech. Now, I look at him, and I see a dude, and I'm like, when he gets the ball in his hands, he breaks fucking ankles. I mean, he shatters sphincters. That's how bad he shakes people out of their shoes. I mean, this dude is incredible in the open field. Absolutely incredible. You know, and he's quick as a little water bug, and he's fast, and, you know, he's got return ability, very good return man at that. And you look at him and you say, man, this guy could be an impact player at the NFL level. Now, granted, I have my concerns about the fact that he's so small. You know, is he going to be limited in how much he can make an impact at the NFL level? You know, a limited catch radius, and frankly, he's not that very good in terms of actually catching the football. I've heard references to him being pretty sure-handed. I didn't see that. I thought he was very inconsistent with his hands. And again, I reference guys that are quick and fast. If you can get open, you can't catch the ball. It doesn't fucking matter. But you can work on that in theory, and you can get better at that. And I do like this kid. And I like somebody maybe in the 4th round that you sit there and bring in as somebody that can make an impact for you as a return man in special teams, a guy that could make gadget plays for, a guy that you can do some things with out of the slot, run some wide receiver screens. I mean, because he is potentially a threat with his quickness, his elusiveness, his speed to potentially be a home run threat or a big play threat anytime you get the football in his hand. And the key thing for an NFL team will be finding a way to manufacture touches for him. It's that simple. Now, there's a bunch of other prospects in this draft class for wide receivers. I just don't have time to talk about them, nor do I have the energy to talk about them at this point. I do like Kenny Lawler as well from California, a guy that I think plays as a better athlete than he actually measured at the combine. And I think people sleep on him as a talent too. But if you've got other questions about my thoughts on this wide receiver class, and I think it's still pretty solid, feel free to let me know in the comments. But at the end of the day, it won't be 2014. But it should still be, in 2 or 3 years, looked upon as a pretty productive class of wide receivers.